It's nice to, excuse me, it's nice to be out of the penalty box where I spend most of my time when I'm here. Appreciate Roger and taking over back there. Looks like he's got a helper too. It's good to get out here occasionally and see what the rest of the world is like. But, when you pick a topic to teach or preach on or to give a lesson on, one of the hardest things for me is to pick the subject. The Bible has got so many things to say that it's sometimes difficult to pick a topic. The topic I picked is the tongue, and I've done this lesson years ago. It was before we ever had PowerPoint, so most of you have probably forgotten it long ago, and the other half wouldn't here to see it anyhow. And I didn't have a PowerPoint back then for it, so it'll be new in that sense. This is a flower from the pocket. Ask Jane what it is. I can't remember. Jane can tell you what it is, but God makes beautiful things. The tongue is not exactly the most beautiful thing in the world, is it? Not to me. When you look at it, it's kind of gross looking. But the tongue can be a useful member, but too often it is not. Too often we're like old Rover. We run around wagging our tongue. And so we need to, as Christians, we need to kind of rein our tongue in. And why? Well, let's look at what the Bible has to say about the tongue. Well, to start off with, the tongue can start wars, it can bring peace, it can break hearts, and it can mend hearts. The tongue can destroy families, but it also can bring families closer together. It can start a problem, it can solve a problem. So is the tongue good or evil? Which would you say? If you had to answer the question before this lesson, would you say it is good or would you say it's evil? Turn to James chapter 3. We're going to look at verses 1 through 12. James chapter 3. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in the horse's mouth that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature. And it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs. Thus, no spring yields both salt water and fresh. James gives a pretty bleak picture of the tongue. He doesn't say much good about it except we bless God. So in a lot of ways, the tongue is an evil. But we're going to look at the evil first. Proverbs, Solomon, the book of Proverbs probably has more to say about the tongue than any book in the Bible. A lot of people don't realize this. Proverbs chapter 10, in the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. Do we want to be wise? If we do, we're told here to restrain our lips. Most of you have seen pictures, and this one's a little blurry, but you get the idea. When you fire a bullet from a gun, once you pull the trigger, the bullet leaves the barrel. I used to coach a 4H 22 rifle team. I had a man who was a captain of the State Patrol who helped me coach that team. Sometimes I would hear him laugh. That he would watch these kids shoot. And I say kids, they were teenagers, they were high school age. He would watch them shoot. He didn't have to look at the target. We taught them when they pulled the trigger that they were to have a mental picture of where their sight was when they pulled the trigger. And they would. After they shot a while, they knew when they pulled the trigger where the bullet was going to hit because they had a mental picture of where that sight was when that gun went off, because the gun was supposed to go off. It was supposed to be a surprise because you're squeezing the trigger. The point being, he could watch their face and he could tell if that shot was good or not because of their reaction. And if their reaction was negative, he'd say, oh, he'd laugh. He'd say, you'd like to bring that one back. You know, words, once they leave your mouth, you can't bring them back. Too often we forget that. What we hope for when we pull that trigger is that we hit the center of that mark. But too often, with our words, just as with that bullet, instead of hitting the center, it's like shooting a melon. You destroy. Instead of accomplishing something, you have destroyed something. Words can destroy people. You need to realize the effect that your words have on others. A talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is a faithful spirit conceals a matter. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with one who flatters with his lips. Look at what Solomon says here about a talebearer. Somebody repeating things, somebody telling things that don't need to be told. Let's look at a little bit more. Proverbs 17:9, he who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. You realize that the person who is seeking love will hide or cover a transgression? Do you realize that just because you know something don't mean you have to say it or repeat it? It don't matter if it's the truth. It don't necessarily have to be told, and shouldn't be told unless it's needful. Proverbs 16:27-28. An ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisper separates the best of friends. The words of talebearers are like tasty trifles, and they go down until the inmost body. You ever know somebody, once they knew something, they just had to tell somebody some juicy gossip, something about somebody else, they just had to tell it. Do we have to tell what we know? Don't we all need someone we can tell our innermost thoughts without worrying about them repeating it? I think we all need somebody like that. If you can't be trusted for somebody to tell you something and you keep it as a secret, or keep it in the way that they told you, then you need to look at yourself. You know, one of the nicest things I think Gina ever said about me was that if you ever have a secret, if you need to tell somebody, tell Lane or Holly. They won't tell nobody. I don't know that she meant it as a compliment at the time she said it, but it was, you need to have somebody you can tell stuff to that you hadn't worried about them telling the rest of the people. You know, not all of us have skeletons, all of us have problems, and we don't need them spread around. Ask yourself, if this was about you or your family, would you want it said? He talks about, you have people out there, you have men that go about, and they just look for the evil in people. And once they have it, they can't wait to tell others. So think about that, the way Solomon here describes these type of people. So see what Titus has to say in Titus 3:2. He says, to speak evil of no one, but to be peaceable, gentle, showing all humility to all men. This is what we should be doing, not to speak evil. 2 Timothy, Paul here writing to Timothy says, but shun profane and idle babbling, for they will increase to more ungodliness, and their message will spread like cancer. Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort. Paul doesn't paint a very good picture of these two men and their idle babbling. We're not to be of this type or of this sort. Paul into the Colossians here says, but now you yourselves are to put off all these, anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds. Much of what we've seen or looked at has been in the Old Testament, but the New Testament has a good bit to say about the tongue and the mouth also. Peter, 1 Peter 2:1. Therefore, laying aside all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and all evil speaking. That don't leave a lot out, does he? all evil speaking. If it's not good, it's evil. And so it's to be left out. It's not part of what a Christian should be saying. Have you ever noticed in the South that we have this thing about bless your heart? Any of you ever heard that terminology, bless your heart? We can say, well, oh, Fred, he don't have a lick of sense. If you were to put his brain on the head of a pin, it'd roll around like a baby on a 6-lane highway. Bless his heart. And that makes it all right. Does it? Does it really make it all right? Not really. We shouldn't be saying things that are not helpful or negative about people. We should think about what we're saying. If it's not needful or helpful, I don't think we need to say it. Sometimes we joke about things, but we need to be careful. We can hurt people with our words. And saying bless your heart don't necessarily make it right. But there's not all bad. The tongue can be used for much good. And let's look at that for a few minutes. It says here in Proverbs chapter 16, starting verse 23, the heart of the wise teaches his mouth and adds learning to his lips. Pleasant words are like honeycomb, sweetness to the soul, and health to the bones. You see here that the tongue can be used to lift people up, to make people better. And that's what we should strive for and pray for, is that heart and that wisdom to teach our mouth to add that learning to our lips. Proverbs 15 and verse 23. A man has joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is. How many of you have ever had someone say something at the right time? It lifted your spirits, it made you feel good. They are a few people, in my experience, that can actually do that and do it consistently. And it should be what we all strive for. But very few people in my time or in my experience are actually able to recognize that time and have the right words to say. Proverbs 25:11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. I don't think any comment needs to be made on some of these. I think they speak for themselves. The tongue of I want you to see how Solomon goes back and forth. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but the fool dies for lack of wisdom. He goes back and forth from the righteous to the foolish and gives us examples. Isaiah chapter 50, verse 4. It says, the Lord has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary. I think this should be in our prayer. At home, at night, whenever we pray, when we're alone. I think this is something we should be praying for, is to have that learning that we can speak that word that will help the weary in the right time with the right words. Isaiah says God has given him this. God is the one who can give that to us also. Paul to the Colossians here in chapter 4, verse 6, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. Answering people, especially during controversial moments, it takes a lot of self-control to keep yourself saying the right things and not becoming angry and speaking things that you shouldn't be saying. Peter admonishes there, chapter 3, verse 10 of 1 Peter, for he who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Again, if you want to see good days, you want a good life, keep your mouth shut. There's a time to speak, but most of the time we ought to be keeping our lips shut. Solomon exhorts us not to be rash with our mouth, not to let your heart utter anything hastily before God, for God is in heaven and you are on earth, therefore let your words be few. Don't promise God things that you don't intend to keep. Don't promise or do, things that you're not going to be able to keep. You need to ask God for the wisdom to make those right choices and to pray for the right type things and promise the right things to God, because we all fall short. And so don't promise. Remember, God's in heaven. God is far above us, knows more than we'll ever know, and we're a speck in the sand on the seashore in comparison to God. So don't be hasty with your words. Be careful. Think about what you're saying. Here in Ecclesiastes it says, a fool's voice is known by his many words. You ever know anybody that just couldn't shut up? That talked all the time, that never would be quiet? It doesn't seem that that's the type of person the wise man would encourage us to be. David requested in Psalms 19, he said, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength, my Redeemer. David requested that God help him, that he might be able to do this. God is the only one that we can depend on that can help us to meditate and be acceptable and to let the words of our mouth be found acceptable to God. This was David's request to God and should be our request also. When Jesus spoke to the scribes and Pharisees, sometimes his words were very strong. He said, but I say to you, every idle word that men may speak, they will give an account for in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. As we get to the conclusion of this lesson, I want you to think about what Jesus is saying to them here. You'll be justified by your words, but you can also be condemned by your words. With that in mind, how should our words be? Should we not think before we talk? Should we not slow down and think before we talk? I'll give a few words of wisdom that I think are at least words of wisdom for the married men of this congregation. Think before you talk. Think before you answer your wife. If you're angry, don't answer at all. It's better to walk off and come back and answer later. Your marriage and your life will be a whole lot better and simpler if you realize that at certain times you're not going to have the right words nor the right answer. Think about it before you say it. One of my final thoughts here is it says even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he is considered perceptive. I don't know how you put it any plainer. Even a fool is considered wise if he keeps his mouth shut. What does that tell you? This comes from the wisest man to ever live on the earth besides Christ. To say that even a wise man, or even a fool, is wise when he keeps his mouth shut. I think we ought to think about these words of Solomon and think about what we say. And let our words be those that would encourage and help people. Because I think that was what God gave us the tongue for. Jesus said, again, here to the scribes and Pharisees, he says, brood of vipers, how can you being evil speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. Do you realize that if you want to know what's inside anyone's heart, all you need to do is listen to them for a while. Listen to a person talk. It needs to be more than just that one time. Especially you girls that go out with these guys, they're going to tell you everything you want to hear to start with. Wait, listen to everything they say for a while, and you'll see, you'll have a window to their heart. Because you can see inside of that person by simply listening to what they say. And that goes to any of us. You want to know a person? Listen to them. And you will know what's in their heart. So as we conclude, if you know the tongue is a window to your heart, what is in your heart? Is good things in your heart? Do you have things bad in your heart, or do you have things good? We all at times have things bad. We all say things that we don't mean. We all wish we hadn't have said things. We want to bring those words back, but you can't bring them back once they're said, just like that bullet coming out the barrel. Once you pull that trigger, they're out. Once you say them, they're out. They're gone. You can't bring them back. You can say you're sorry, but that don't always fix the problem. It's a start, but it'd be much easier if it was never said to start with. So, tonight, if you have a need, if you're not a Christian, you can become a Christian. If you are a Christian and you have a need or sin in your life for the prayers of the church, or you have a need because of other problems going on, you have an opportunity. Tonight, we always try to give people the opportunity. Most of us here at one time or another have taken that opportunity to ask for prayer. And it's not a weakness to need prayer. I think the only weakness is not realizing you do need it and don't ask for it. So if you have a need, would you come as Mark leads us?